Hello, thank you very much for joining me today. My name is Chris Redston, and I'm the head of Rainforest Trust UK, which is a British charity working in partnership with Rainforest Trust in the US to protect threatened rainforests around the world. Today I'll be talking about the importance of rainforest protection in the fight against climate change, and also looking at the work we do here at Rainforest Trust, and how you can help save the rainforests and protect the climate. Firstly, just give me a second while I share my screen. Okay. Right, that went well. Anyway, I think a good place to start this talk is the Amazon fires in 2019. When the world was shocked by the news of the fires, which became headline news around the world and sparked a global sort of wave of compassion and concern for the plight of the rainforests and the plight of the climate. But the headlines about the climate are still pretty shocking. For example, recently we've seen that the climate crisis could displace over 1 billion people in the next 30 years. Ice is still melting in the polar ice caps, and the world is still failing to meet its targets to stop the destruction of nature. The Amazon is still under threat with fires, loggers, and now coronavirus is severely impacting conservation efforts in that area. And Brazil actually had an even worse time with fires in the Amazon in 2020 than it did in 2019, although it made hardly any headlines. And climate change and agriculture, for example, clearing rainforest for cattle ranches and crops such as soy and oil palm, is driving record levels of deforestation. So let's have a look at why rainforests are so important for our planet. Firstly, they're home to 50% of the world's species, even though they only cover about 6% of the land area. So they're vital for species protection. And as well as the climate crisis, of course, we're currently undergoing an extinction crisis as more and more species become extinct. Also, over 1 billion people rely directly or indirectly on the world's rainforests for their survival. So that's Indigenous people who live within the forests, and also hundreds of thousands of people who rely on them for their clean water supply, for protection against landslides, and other ecosystem services that the rainforests provide. They also produce 20% of the oxygen we breathe. So wherever you are in the world, the impact of the rainforest destruction is clear to see. They also drive and stabilise the planet's weather patterns, which means that if we cut down all the rainforests, a lot of areas that currently have good rainfall and are used for growing crops will be placed into permanent drought. And from a climate point of view, they're a huge carbon store. They store over 250 billion tons of carbon. And of course, when you destroy the rainforest, carbon is allowed to enter the atmosphere as the greenhouse gas CO2. Originally, there were 6 million square miles of rainforest on the planet. Now there's less than half, over 2.4 million square miles. So we lost over half in the last 100 years. And they're still being destroyed at a rate of nearly 70,000 acres a day. That's 31,000 square miles a year. That's about the same as the land area of a country like Hungary. And also, rainforests are a significant driver of climate change. Tropical deforestation accounts for about 15% of net global carbon emissions. That's about the same as emissions from every car, bus, truck, plane, ship and train on the planet. So the global transportation sector produces the same amount of climate impact as tropical deforestation. And this, of course, releases billions of tons of CO2 into the atmosphere, which drives climate change. Although there is an answer, studies have shown that halting tropical deforestation and allowing for regrowth could mitigate up to 50% of net global carbon emissions over the next 30 years. So if we stop cutting down the rainforest and allow them to regrow, we'll have a huge impact on climate change up to 2050. Which is where Rainforest Trust comes in, as we've been involved in conservation since 1988. Since then, we have protected over 24 million acres of rainforest. And here's some of our projects around the world. We work in all countries that we possibly can that have rainforests across the tropics. So from Mexico to Central America, huge amount of work in South America, Africa, Asia, Southeast Asia and Australasia. And we always work in collaboration with trusted in-country partner NGOs, because we found that having a partner within the country that really understands the conservation and the way everything works in the country is essential for making conservation really stick. And we work with over 190 of these partner NGOs so far, some of which are shown at the bottom of this slide. These NGOs identify for us species and carbon-rich areas that need our urgent protection. This takes into account a number of endangered or critically endangered species on the IUCN Red List in this particular area. And also, we now calculate the amount of carbon stored in every project we undertake in the rainforests. Okay, here I'll talk a little about the types of Rainforest Trust projects we undertake. Firstly, we do land purchases, which is fairly self-explanatory. Land purchases are quite expensive, so we only do them where it's really important that the land is protected, and this is the best way to do so. This is usually perhaps an area which has a very high concentration of endangered or critically endangered species, or an area that can have a real added conservation impact. For example, to create a wildlife corridor between one protected area and another. Also, we do land designations where we work with local and national governments to protect areas such to create national parks, protected area, community reserves, wildlife reserves, etc. And this allows us to protect much, much larger areas of land, often in the hundreds of thousands of acres. We also work with Indigenous communities to provide land titling for their ancestral lands, as Indigenous communities are often the best stewards of the lands they have lived in and worked and lived in harmony with for millennia. I'll talk a little bit more about that one in a later slide. And we're also very keen to expand our current protected areas to give even more protection for the species that we've saved in those areas that are currently protected. Okay, now I'm going to look at 3 examples of those projects. The first is in the Loisa ecosystem, which is in the north of Sumatra in Indonesia. And as you may know, this is one of the most important ecosystems on the planet. This current project, we're aiming to protect about 2,500 acres through a land purchase, which is quite expensive, costs £800 per acre. But one important thing about this project, it expands an existing protected area and joins it with another protected area, which will help species migrate from one large area to another. This is particularly important for the Asian elephant, which is in this area, as it connects their feeding grounds back to their breeding grounds. In this project, we have about 140 metric tons of CO2 per acre, so the total carbon stored is nearly 350 metric tons of CO2 equivalent. And it has a large number of threatened species, because the Loisa is famous for being the last place on Earth where tigers, elephants, and orangutans all roam in the same area. So it's a very important place to protect. The second project is one that we've completed in Papua New Guinea. This is an area of about 400,000 acres, and this was a designation which actually created the first ever nationally recognized protected area in the country. And being a designation, this worked out a lot cheaper to do. It was only £1 an acre to protect this priceless forest. Each acre contains over 100 metric tons of CO2 equivalent, and the total carbon stored here is 42 million metric tons. So had that all been cleared or burnt for agriculture, that would have entered the atmosphere, driving climate change. And again, there's a large number of threatened species here, particularly these rather cute and adorable characters, which are called the Matschie's tree kangaroos. Yep, some kangaroos live in trees. Who knew? In fact, there are 12 species of kangaroos that live in trees, and they all live on the island of New Guinea or on surrounding islands. There are also a number of birds of paradise, which are endemic to Papua New Guinea, and many other endemic and endangered species like this Baird's echidna. The third project is an indigenous land titling project in the Peruvian Amazon. This project protects over 6 million acres of rainforest, and we work with about 220 indigenous communities to get legal protection for their ancestral lands, which will in turn provide extra additional protection for the area and prevent it being logged or developed. This was very cost effective at only 60p per acre, especially as every acre stored over 180 metric tons of CO2 equivalent. So the total carbon stored in this project is over 1 billion metric tons of CO2 equivalent. And of course, in the Amazon, you'd expect a wide range of threatened and endemic species, such as the iconic jaguar, which is, of course, on our logo, various monkeys, many of which are threatened and endangered, the giant river otter, which lives in the wetlands in that area, and the Baird's tapir, which is another threatened species. Okay, since 1988, we've created 178 protected areas, totaling over 24 million acres. And recently we did a survey to find out exactly how many of those protected areas still had good forest cover. So we were delighted to find that all our protected areas that we looked at, that 92% of those had less than 5% deforestation. And these are areas we protected going all the way back to the late 80s and early 90s. And you can tell this is proper science because we have a bar chart to prove it. Even more impressive, perhaps, is at least 50% of our protected areas suffered less than 0.2% tree cover loss. So that kind of shows that our conservation model works, and working with our partner NGOs is a very successful way of protecting rainforests. And so, you know, we feel confident that if a rainforest is protected by Rainforest Trust, it stays protected. We also like to quantify our impact on endangered and threatened species. And if we're looking at bird species, In our protected areas, over 450 endangered and vulnerable bird species inhabit those areas, and nearly 300 endangered and vulnerable mammal species also live in our protected areas. And this, of course, will really help prevent extinction of these really threatened creatures in the future. And in terms of our climate impact, across our protected areas, we've protected over 18 billion trees, which can be equivalent to over 4 billion metric tons of CO2 equivalents that are safeguarded in Rainforest Trust protected areas. So I firmly believe that protecting rainforests is probably the most effective thing a company or an individual can do to balance their own carbon deficit and fight climate change. On average, it only costs £1.60 to protect an area of threatened rainforest. And actually, that works even more affordable because of our Saves Challenge. With our Saves Challenge, all donations to specific projects are automatically doubled, saving twice as much vital rainforest. I'd also like to talk a bit here about our Rainforest Trust Conservation Circle, which is our business partnership program. We have hundreds of businesses and corporations around the world that support our conservation work, obviously because they see it a way to balance their own carbon impact and to contribute to the protection of the rainforest and also to fight climate change. And being a member of the Conservation Circle provides benefits for companies that are taking part, such as using our logo on their website, and also we can provide what we call conservation hero certificates, which can show how many acres have been saved and how much carbon has been stored. And these are very useful for companies in their own promotion and social media. And we can also give social media support for companies as well on our Facebook and Instagram and Twitter accounts. So we're always very happy to do what we can to support the businesses that are supporting us. And supporting us can be a very effective way of protecting rainforests. A donation of only £80 a month would protect, on average, about 1,500 acres a year. £200 a month would protect nearly 4,000 acres, and £400 a month would protect over 7,500 acres on average. So if you'd like to help us protect our rainforests and fight climate change, please email us at uk@rainforesttrust.org. And of course, you can find out more about our work, check out our projects, and donate online at www.rainforesttrust.org. And I'd like to finish with a quote from Sir David Attenborough, who said that what we do now and in the next few years will profoundly affect the next few thousand years. As you may know, this decade is absolutely vital for the future of the planet. And this is when we really need to make an impact. So, if you'd like to support Rainforest Trust, definitely now is the time to do so. Okay, thank you very much indeed for listening to my presentation today. And I hope that was interesting and useful. And we hope that you can join us in our work. Save the rainforest, save the climate. Bye-bye.